The Mason family reunion was already in full swing when I pulled up to the lakeside estate in Vermont 45 minutes late. Deliberately. At 34, I had learned that punctuality only meant more time spent enduring subtle jabs about my unconventional career choices. These gatherings had always been a showcase for the family's golden children. My older brother James with his surgical practice, cousin Eliza with her law partnership, and even my younger sister Naomi, who had recently made partner at a prestigious consulting firm. I stepped out of my modest sedan, straightening the lapels of my charcoal blazer, not designer but well-tailored, and walked past the line of luxury vehicles toward the grand colonial house, where laughter and classical music drifted through open windows. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Olivia, you finally decided to join us, my father called from the wraparound porch, martini in hand. His tone carried that familiar mix of disappointment and resignation that had become his default when addressing me. Everyone's been here for almost an hour. I offered a practice smile and light wave. Had to wrap up a client call, I replied, climbing the pristine white steps. This wasn't entirely untrue. I had been on a call, but not with a client. It was with my lead negotiator finalizing details of the acquisition agreement that would be announced tomorrow. Still doing that online business thing? He asked, already turning back toward the party, interest fading faster than summer twilight. Your cousin Patrick just made senior vice president at Morgan Stanley, 32 years old, youngest in the firm's history. Before I could respond, my brother James appeared in the doorway, his confident stance occupying the space as if it had been built around him. At 38, he was the undisputed pride of the family, chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Boston Memorial, board member of 3 medical technology companies, and father of 2 perfect children whose portraits grandmother commissioned annually from a renowned artist. Liv, he said with the slightly patronizing smile I'd grown accustomed to. We were just discussing the medical center's expansion. Dad's considering a major donation to the new pediatric wing. I accepted the glass of champagne. A server offered as I stepped into the grand foyer where crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. Sounds impactful, I said neutrally, knowing my contribution to the conversation wasn't actually expected. Charity work was always more your territory, wasn't it? James continued, his voice carrying just enough to ensure nearby relatives could hear. All those little entrepreneurial projects you dabble in. My mother appeared then, radiant in designer linen, her approach preceded by the gentle clinking of her signature gold bracelets. Olivia, darling, she said, air-kissing near my cheeks. You look healthy, though perhaps something in a brighter color would be more flattering for summer. Naomi could help. She just had a personal styling session at Bergdorf's. I sipped my champagne, allowing the dry effervescence to mask the reflexive response that threatened to surface. I'm comfortable with my aesthetic choices, Mom, I said evenly. How's the tennis season treating your shoulder? She dismissed my question with a graceful wave. I wanted to make sure you knew we've saved you a seat next to your cousin Daniel. For dinner. He's single again, you know. Divorced last spring, but amicably. He's made remarkable strides with that hedge fund of his. I'll be sure to ask about his divorce over appetizers, I said dryly. Always a conversation starter. My mother's expression flickered with disapproval. Olivia, you're not getting any younger. 34 and still. She gestured vaguely, at all of me, as if my entire existence was the unfinished sentence. James was already married with his first child at your age, and your practice established. The unspoken comparison hung between us. James, the successful surgeon. Naomi, the rising corporate star. And me, the perpetual family disappointment. The one who'd walked away from a promising position at a prestigious consulting firm 5 years ago to find herself, only to end up running what they all assumed was a struggling online business from my downtown loft. What they didn't know, what I had carefully kept from them, was that my little online business had evolved into Nexus Dynamics, a supply chain AI company that had revolutionized inventory management and predictive logistics across 3 continents. Under an intricate structure of holding companies and a deliberately low personal profile, I had built something extraordinary while they were busy lamenting my wasted potential. "I'm doing fine, Mom," I said simply, scanning the room and nodding. To various relatives who regarded me with a mixture of pity and mild curiosity, I spotted Naomi holding court near the fireplace, her animated gestures punctuating what was doubtlessly another tale of corporate conquest. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from Mira, my chief operating officer. Final documents signed. Legal has cleared all hurdles. Announcement scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Congratulations, CEO. I allowed myself the briefest smile before tucking my phone away. 5 years of relentless work, strategic vision, and silent perseverance were about to culminate in a $2 billion acquisition by Redwood Technologies, the Silicon Valley giant whose founder had once told me my logistics optimization algorithm was theoretically interesting but commercially impractical. Olivia, my cousin Eliza approached, impeccable in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. "I heard you moved into that renovated factory building, downtown. Very bohemian of you." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "The loft suits my needs," I replied. What I didn't add was that I now owned the entire building, along with 3 others in the emerging tech corridor. Eliza's husband Richard joined us, passing her a fresh drink. "How's the, internet business?" he asked with the forced interest of someone who'd been reminded to make conversation. "With the family's black sheep. Websites, isn't it?" "Supply chain optimization," I corrected mildly. Right, he nodded, clearly not registering the specifics. "Patrick was just telling us about the emerging markets fund he's launching. $20 million in initial investment. Not bad for starter capital, eh?" I nodded politely. Nexus Dynamics had secured its first round of $45 million in venture funding within 6 months of incorporation. But that wasn't information I had shared with the family. The company's meteoric rise had been documented in industry publications and financial journals, but the intensely private founder, me, had remained deliberately anonymous, operating through a management team that became the public face of the company. "Dinner is served," announced Aunt Margaret, my father's sister and the family matriarch since grandmother's passing. The announcement prompted a general migration toward the expansive dining room where table settings gleamed under warm lighting. As predicted, I found myself seated beside Cousin Daniel, recently divorced hedge fund manager, and my apparent designated dinner companion. On my other side sat Uncle Robert, my father's older brother and the family patriarch whose banking fortune had set the standard against which all other Mason successes were measured. "Olivia," Uncle Robert began as servers presented the first course, "your father tells me you're still pursuing that online venture of yours. Admirable persistence, though perhaps it's time to consider a more established path. The family has connections that could open doors for you." I speared a perfectly seared scallop. "I appreciate the offer, Uncle Robert, but my business is actually doing quite well." Of course, he nodded indulgently. "But there's a difference between surviving and truly thriving, isn't there? Look at James, pioneering that new cardiac procedure featured in medical journals, or Naomi, youngest partner at McKinley Consulting. That's the Mason standard." The conversation around us flowed with familiar rhythms: investment opportunities, vacation properties, private school applications, medical breakthroughs, and legal triumphs. The currency of family status exchanged as freely as the expensive wine being poured into crystal glasses. "Olivia still has time to find her way," my mother interjected from across the table, her voice carrying that special blend of defense and disappointment. Not everyone blooms early. I caught Naomi's barely concealed smirk as she turned to her dinner partner. At 31, my younger sister had long ago surpassed me in the family hierarchy. Her tailored suits and confident pronouncements about market trends had earned her the approval I had apparently forfeited when I walked away from the prestige of Johnson & Whitfield Consulting. I hear you're working with some small businesses. On their supply issues? Naomi directed the question to me with exaggerated interest. That must be rewarding in its own way. It can be, I replied, maintaining my composure. What she didn't know was that Nexus Dynamics had completely transformed how global retailers managed inventory forecasting, reducing waste by billions of dollars annually and earning accolades for environmental impact alongside its financial success. Naomi's team just landed the Westfield International account, my father announced proudly. Largest consulting contract in the firm's history. Appreciative murmurs rippled around the table. I nodded acknowledgement, remembering how Westfield's CEO had personally called me last month to discuss implementing Nexus technology across their entire supply chain. A contract worth 8 figures annually that would be announced as part of tomorrow's acquisition news. Daniel has been making waves too, Aunt Margaret added. His fund outperformed the market by 12% last quarter. Daniel straightened beside me, clearly pleased with the recognition. We've developed a proprietary algorithm for identifying undervalued tech stocks, he explained, his attention now fully engaged as he had an audience. It's particularly effective with logistics and supply chain companies. There's one we've been watching called Nexus Dynamics, completely revolutionizing the space, though very secretive about their leadership. I nearly choked on my wine, but recovered quickly. Interesting, I managed. What makes them stand out? Daniel launched into an analysis that was surprisingly accurate about my company's technology while being completely unaware of who he was speaking to. Their founder is this brilliant enigma, he concluded. No one knows much about them, operates entirely through a management team. But whoever they are, they've built something extraordinary. Perhaps they value the work more than the recognition, I suggested mildly. That's naive in today's market, James interjected. Personal branding is essential. If this founder were truly savvy, they'd be leveraging their identity to maximize valuation. Anonymity is just leaving money on the table. If only they knew. The deliberate choice to keep my identity separate from Nexus had been strategic, allowing the company's technology to be evaluated on its merits, rather than being dismissed as another girl boss novelty in the male-dominated tech sector. It had also given me the precious space to build something authentic without the weight of family expectations and inevitable comparisons. Speaking of leaving money on the table, my father pivoted. James is considering angel investing in medical technology startups. Perhaps you could give him some perspective from your smaller-scale experience, Olivia. I nodded, recognizing the backhanded request. Happy to share insights, I replied, noticing a text notification illuminate my phone screen. Another message from Mira. Press release finalized. Financial media already buzzing with rumors of acquisition price. Bloomberg requesting first interview. Dessert arrived. Elaborate chocolate constructions that matched the family's preference for impressive appearances. Conversation shifted to summer travel plans, Naomi's month in the south of France, James's speaking engagement in Tokyo, followed by a family vacation in Bali, my parents' Mediterranean cruise. And what about you, Olivia? Any travel plans? Aunt Margaret asked with the politeness of someone who expected a much less impressive answer. I might need to be in San Francisco next week, I said truthfully. The Redwood Technologies headquarters would be hosting the formal announcement event, and my presence would finally be required as the acquisition moved forward. Business or pleasure? Daniel asked. A bit of both, hopefully, I replied. The understatement of the year. Tomorrow morning, the business world would wake up to news of the third largest tech acquisition of the year, and the mysterious founder of Nexus Dynamics would finally step into the spotlight. As dinner concluded, the party migrated to the lakeside patio where staff had arranged comfortable seating around fire features that warded off the evening chill. Strategic lighting illuminated the manicured gardens extending toward the water's edge, creating a postcard-perfect scene of privileged leisure. I found myself beside my father as he nursed an expensive scotch. For a moment, we stood in unusual silence, watching the moonlight play across the gentle ripples of the lake. "Your brother's children are already showing remarkable aptitude," he finally said. "Alexandra is reading at a 5th grade level, though she's only 7, and Michael's chess abilities are extraordinary for a 5-year-old. I nodded, recognizing the familiar pattern. Conversations that inevitably circled back to the achievements of others, subtle reminders of milestones I had failed to reach. "Dad," I began carefully, "does it ever occur to you that success might look different for different people?" He glanced at me, momentary surprise flickering across his features before settling back into familiar certainty. "Success is measurable, Olivia. Tangible. It leaves markers in the world that others can recognize and respect." He gestured toward the gathering. "Family legacy, institutional achievement, recognizable contribution. These aren't subjective concepts. And what if the contributions aren't immediately visible, or are deliberately kept private?" He sighed, the sound heavy with patience, worn thin. "Then they're not making the impact they could be. Potential without application is just waste." He finished his scotch. "Your mother worries about you, you know. We all do. This extended phase of finding yourself. At some point, you need to build something real." The irony was almost painful. Tomorrow, financial analysts would be dissecting the company I had built. Business schools would be updating case studies to include Nexus Dynamics' revolutionary approach, and the Mason family would finally understand that while they had been pitying me, I had been quietly redefining an entire industry. "I should check in with James before he leaves," my father said, already moving away. "He has an early surgery tomorrow." I remained by the lake, the gentle lapping of water against the shore, providing a rhythmic counterpoint to the social chatter behind me. My phone buzzed again, this time with an alert from my financial team. The acquisition paperwork had triggered automatic notifications to major shareholders. Within 12 hours, my net worth would officially exceed that of every other family member combined. Hiding from Daniel, Naomi appeared beside me, her voice carrying the slight loosening that indicated she'd enjoyed several glasses of the expensive champagne. "Just getting some air," I replied. She studied me for a moment, her expression softening unexpectedly. "You know, sometimes I envy you a little," she admitted. This was unexpected. Me? Why? The freedom, no expectations. She gestured vaguely toward the party. "Do you know what it's like to have Dad call after every quarterly result? To have James ask pointed questions about my 5-year career strategy over Thanksgiving dinner? To know that anything less than exceptional is failure?" I almost laughed at the irony. "I think I have some idea." "No, you don't," she said, not unkindly. "You escaped it. When you left Johnson and Whitfield, they all wrote you off. The pressure transferred to me. But you got to disappear into whatever this small business thing is. No one expects anything remarkable from you anymore." I considered her words carefully. "And that's freedom to you? Being underestimated?" She shrugged, looking suddenly younger than her 31 years. "Sometimes I wonder what I'd do if no one was watching. If I could just start over without the weight of the Mason name and all its expectations." For a fleeting moment, I was tempted to tell her everything, about the late night's coding, the rejection letters from skeptical investors who couldn't believe my algorithm could do what I claimed, the strategic decision to remain anonymous to let the technology speak for itself, The vindication of watching Nexus grow from a concept to a billion-dollar enterprise. Instead, I simply said, maybe underestimation has its advantages. Naomi's attention was already drifting back to the party. Eliza's calling me over. Probably wants to gossip about Daniel's ex-wife. Are you coming back in? In a minute, I said. Alone again, I checked the time. 10:37 p.m. In less than 12 hours, everything would change. The years of dismissive comments, patronizing suggestions, and pitying glances were about to collide with a very different reality. Part of me savored the anticipation of that moment, not out of petty revenge, but as validation of a path that had been entirely my own. I rejoined the gathering as it began to wind down, exchanging polite goodbyes with relatives who had already mentally moved on to their next important engagement. My mother caught me at the door, her expression a mixture of habitual concern and resignation. Breakfast tomorrow? She suggested. Just the two of us before everyone heads out? There's a lovely little cafe in town. I hesitated, calculating timing. The acquisition announcement was scheduled for 9 a.m. Eastern Time. How? About 10:30? I countered. I have a video call at 9. She nodded, clearly assuming it was something inconsequential. 10:30 works. Don't be late, darling. I drove back to my downtown loft, the contrast between the lakeside estate and my chosen home striking but not in the way my family assumed. The converted industrial building housed not only my personal residence on the top floor, but also the original Nexus Dynamics offices on the levels below. Though we had expanded to 3 international locations, I had kept our headquarters here, a deliberate choice to remain grounded in the community where it all began. Inside my spacious loft, floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city skyline. The space was a careful balance of minimalist design and thoughtful luxury, not the bohemian stereotype my family imagined, but a deliberate expression of my personal aesthetic. I kicked off my shoes and poured a small glass of champagne from the bottle I had kept chilled for this occasion. My laptop chimed with an incoming video call. Mira's face appeared on screen, her usual composed demeanor giving way to barely contained excitement. Everything's set, she confirmed. Legal has cleared final review, press embargoes are in place, but already there's speculation on all the financial channels, and the Redwood team has confirmed the announcement schedule. How was the family reunion? I laughed softly. Predictable. My cousin Daniel actually brought up Nexus Dynamics as an investment opportunity without having any idea he was talking to the founder. Mira shook her head, amused. They really have no clue, do they? None, I confirmed, which has been exactly as intended all along, but tomorrow changes that. Are you ready? She asked, more seriously. Once the announcement goes live, your name will be everywhere. 5 years of anonymity ends in 12 hours. I considered this, swirling the champagne in my glass. I think I am. The company is established enough now to withstand the scrutiny. The technology speaks for itself. And honestly, I'm ready to stop deflecting questions at family gatherings. Your family is going to be shocked, Mira noted with a hint of satisfaction. She had witnessed enough dismissive phone calls and condescending text messages over the years to understand the significance of this moment. That's not why we built this, I reminded her, though we both knew the vindication would be undeniably sweet. Of course not, she agreed. We built it because your algorithm works and because you saw something everyone else missed. But I'm still looking forward to the reactions tomorrow. After finalizing a few details and confirming the morning schedule, I ended the call and moved to the window. The city lights twinkled below, a constellation of possibilities I had always seen more clearly than the prescribed path my family had laid out. Tomorrow would bring a seismic shift in how they perceived me, but the true victory wasn't in proving them wrong. It was in having built something meaningful entirely on my own terms. I set my alarm for 6 a.m., knowing the pre-announcement briefings would begin early. As I prepared for bed, I thought about my conversation with Naomi by the lake. Perhaps after tomorrow, she might understand that there were different kinds of freedom, including the freedom to define success on your own terms, away from the spotlight until you were ready to step into it deliberately. Morning arrived with the soft illumination of dawn peeking through automated blinds programmed to rise with the sun. I had been awake for over an hour already, reviewing presentation decks and messaging with the executive team as we prepared for the announcement. That would change everything. The kitchen's built-in coffee system had delivered my second espresso as I studied market predictions and finalized talking points for the press conference scheduled for later that day in San Francisco. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Redwood Technologies CEO Marcus Chen. "Olivia," he greeted, his voice carrying the focused energy of a man about to make history. "Everything set on your end?" "All systems go," I confirmed, wandering to the window where the city was coming alive below. "Our team is prepped for the market response, and I'll be on a plane to San Francisco immediately after the announcement goes live." There was a pause, and I could almost see him shaking his head in amazement. "You know, when you first approached us with this acquisition proposal, I thought it was someone playing an elaborate joke. The mysterious founder of Nexus finally revealing herself and offering us the opportunity to acquire the most innovative logistics AI in the market? It seemed too perfect." I smiled, remembering our first meeting, how his skepticism had transformed to genuine admiration within 20 minutes of my technical demonstration. "The timing was right," I said simply, "for both companies." "Well, in about," he paused, "97 minutes, the business world is going to be blindsided in the best possible way. See you in San Francisco." After ending the call, I moved through my morning routine with methodical precision. The navy silk dress I selected was sophisticated without being showy, paired with a tailored blazer that projected confidence and competence. My jewelry was minimal but deliberate, small diamond studs that had been my grandmother's, the only family member who had encouraged my unconventional thinking before her passing. At precisely 8:45 a.m., I received the confirmation text from our PR director. The embargoed press release had been distributed to major financial outlets and would go live in 15 minutes. I took a deep breath, acknowledging the magnitude of the moment. 5 years of working in relative anonymity were about to end. 5 years of building something extraordinary while my family assumed I was floundering were about to be recontextualized. At 8:58, I put my phone on silent mode as it began to vibrate continuously with incoming notifications. Headlines were, breaking across financial networks. Breaking. Redwood Technologies acquires Nexus Dynamics in $3.2 billion deal. Supply chain revolutionary Nexus Dynamics joins Redwood in market-shaking acquisition. Mystery tech founder revealed. Olivia. Mason behind 3.2B Nexus acquisition. I watched the business channels as commentators scrambled to report on both the massive acquisition and the revelation of Nexus Dynamics' previously anonymous founder. Financial analysts were already discussing the strategic implications, with some predicting a 15% jump in Redwood stock when markets opened. In a stunning revelation, the secretive founder of supply chain AI powerhouse Nexus Dynamics has been identified as Olivia Mason, who built the company from concept to multi-billion-dollar enterprise in just 5 years, one commentator announced. Mason, who previously worked at Johnson & Whitfield Consulting before leaving to found Nexus, has maintained a deliberately low profile while developing what many industry experts now recognize as the most significant innovation in supply chain management of the decade. My phone continued its silent vibration dance across the countertop. I knew without looking that among the dozens of messages would be increasingly confused texts from family members. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Most of them would still be at the lakeside estate, probably gathering for a late breakfast when the news broke. At 9:15, I finally picked up my phone and began scrolling through notifications. Industry colleagues, former professors, Venture capital partners and business associates were all sending congratulations. Buried among them were 7 missed calls. From my father, 3 from James, and a series of increasingly urgent texts from Naomi. Olivia, is this you they're talking about on Bloomberg? Call me immediately. They're saying Nexus Dynamics was acquired for $3.2 billion. OMG, your name is everywhere. Dad just spilled coffee all over himself. I allowed myself a small smile at that last one before putting the phone down again. It would be most effective to let the full reality sink in before I engaged. Besides, I had a breakfast appointment at 10:30. By 10:15, I was pulling into the parking lot of Café Laurent, the charming little place my mother had suggested for our breakfast. Through the window, I could see her already seated, her attention fixed on her phone with an expression of complete disbelief. She didn't notice my arrival until I was standing directly beside the table. "Mom," I said quietly. She looked up, her eyes widening as she took in my appearance, the confidence in my posture, the quality of my attire suddenly registering differently now that context had shifted. "Olivia," she breathed, half rising. "Is it true? The news is saying they're reporting that Nexus Dynamics is—" I sat down across from her, placing my phone face down on the table. "Yes, it's true. Nexus Dynamics has been acquired by Redwood Technologies for $3.2 billion. The deal was finalized yesterday and announced this morning." "And you founded this company? You're the owner?" Her voice held a quality I'd never heard before, a mixture of shock, confusion, and something that might have been dawning respect. "I am, or was. I'll maintain a significant ownership stake and join Redwood's executive team as Chief Innovation Officer. But yes, I founded Nexus 5 years ago." I picked up the menu, scanning it casually. "The avocado toast looks good here. Have you ordered?" "Yet?" She ignored my question entirely. 5 years? All this time when we thought you were just what, Mom?" I asked, meeting her eyes directly. "Just struggling with some small online business," she finished weakly. "Why didn't you tell us? All these years of family gatherings, all those conversations where you pitied me," I completed her thought. "Where Dad suggested entry-level positions that might salvage my career? Where James and Naomi showcased their achievements while everyone nodded sympathetically in my direction." She had the grace to look embarrassed. "We were concerned about you." "No," I corrected. Gently. "You were concerned about how my apparent lack of success reflected on the family. There's a difference." The waitress approached, and I ordered for both of us as my mother seemed incapable of focusing on menu selections at the moment. When we were alone again, she leaned forward. "Your father is beside himself," she said. "James is trying to make sense of how this happened without any of us knowing. And Naomi—" She trailed off. "And Naomi?" I prompted. Naomi is alternating between stunned silence and insisting there must be some mistake in the reporting. A hint of a smile finally touched my mother's lips. I think this might be the first time I've seen her speechless. My phone lit up with another call, this time from Marcus Chen confirming the transportation arrangements for San Francisco. I excused myself to take it, stepping outside briefly to finalize details. When I returned, my mother was staring at her phone again, scrolling through news coverage. "Forbes has a feature on you," she said, looking up. "They're calling you the stealth innovator who transformed supply chain management while maintaining a uniquely low profile. There's a quote here from the CTO of Global Retail Solutions saying your algorithm has saved them over $100 million in waste reduction alone." The waitress delivered our food, and I took a bite of perfectly prepared avocado toast before responding. "The technology is revolutionary," I acknowledged. "It processes unstructured data from thousands of sources to predict supply chain disruptions weeks before traditional systems can detect them. We've saved our clients billions in aggregate. But why keep it secret? She pressed. Why let us believe you were less successful than you are? I considered my response carefully. I didn't set out to deceive anyone. In the beginning, anonymity was a strategic choice. Female founders in tech often face additional scrutiny and skepticism, particularly in AI development. By letting the technology speak for itself, we avoided potential bias in how it was evaluated. As time passed and the company grew, maintaining privacy became valuable in other ways. What ways? She asked, her food untouched before her. It allowed me to build something authentic without external pressure or expectations. No family legacy to live up to, no constant comparisons to siblings or cousins, no pressure to perform according to someone else's definition of success. Just the freedom to create something I believed in. My mother was quiet for a long moment, pushing food around her plate. I don't know whether to be proud or hurt, she finally admitted. Proud of what you've accomplished, or hurt that you felt you couldn't share it with us. Maybe both are valid, I suggested. But consider this. Would you have understood what I was building before it was successfully completed? Or would you have seen it as a risky venture pulling me further from the established path you and Dad always advocated? The look in her eyes confirmed my suspicion. Even now, with irrefutable proof of my success, she was struggling to reconcile the daughter she thought she knew with the business leader being celebrated across financial media. Your father will want to talk to you, she said finally. I'm sure he will, I agreed. But I'm flying to San Francisco in 3 hours for the formal announcement and meetings with the Redwood executive team. I'll be there for several days. You're leaving? Today? But the family will need to wait, I said firmly. This is a $2 billion business transaction, Mom. It takes priority over family processing time. She seemed taken, aback by my tone, not rude but unapologetically assertive. This was new territory for both of us. As we finished breakfast, my mother's phone rang continuously. I could see family names flashing on her screen: James, Aunt Margaret, Uncle Robert, all undoubtedly seeking confirmation and details about the news they were seeing. You should probably get back to the house, I suggested as I paid the bill. They'll have questions I don't have time to answer right now. She gathered her things, movements automatic as she clearly struggled to process the morning's revelations. At the door, she paused. Olivia? She said, her voice softer than usual. I always knew you were intelligent, but this is extraordinary. I'm sorry if we ever made you feel less than what you are. It was the closest thing to an apology I could remember receiving from her. I nodded acknowledgement, neither accepting nor dismissing it outright. I'll call when I'm back from San Francisco, I promised. As we parted in the parking lot, I noticed something new in her expression as she looked at me. Not just surprise or confusion, but something that might have been respect. It was a start. Back at my loft, I finished packing for San Francisco while fielding essential calls from the executive team. The market had opened, and as predicted, Redwood's stock was soaring on news of the acquisition. Financial analysts were already updating their models to account for the competitive advantage Nexus technology would give Redwood in the logistics space. My assistant Kieran arrived to handle transportation to the airport, briefing me on schedule adjustments as we descended to the private car waiting outside. Your father has called the office 17 times, he noted with professional neutrality. Your brother twice, and someone named Daniel has left 3 messages asking about investment opportunities. I couldn't help but laugh at that last one. Cousin Daniel, who had just yesterday pontificated about Nexus Dynamics as an investment target while seated next to its founder, was now scrambling to get in on the action. No response is necessary at this point, I instructed. Family matters will wait until after the San Francisco meetings. The sleek black car pulled away from the curb just as another vehicle turned sharply into the street, my father's distinctive Mercedes. I glimpsed his face through the windshield, a mixture of determination and disbelief as he spotted my departing car. For a moment, I considered instructing the driver to stop, but decided against it. This conversation deserved proper time and attention, not a hurried exchange on the street. "Looks like your father tried to catch you," Kieran observed, having noticed the same thing. "He'll have to wait," I said simply. "We have a plane to catch." The private terminal at the airport provided welcome tranquility after the morning's emotional intensity. As we prepared to board, Mira joined us, tablet in hand with the latest market reactions and press coverage. "The story's evolving," she reported as we settled into plush seats. Initial focus was on the acquisition price and Redwood's strategic advantage, but now they're digging into you personally. 30-something founder builds billion-dollar enterprise in silence, makes for compelling headlines. I scanned the articles she'd highlighted. Business publications were piecing together my limited professional history: education at Princeton, early career at Johnson & Whitfield, mysterious departure 5 years ago, and then the stealth creation of what was now recognized as a revolutionary technology company. "They're trying to make it a gender story," I noted, seeing references to the rarefied female tech founder billionaire club I had apparently joined. "Unavoidable," Mira acknowledged. "The fact that you're under 35 and female makes it newsworthy in their eyes. But the core coverage focuses on the technology itself, which is what matters." As the plane took off, I gazed down at the diminishing landscape below. Somewhere down there, the Mason family was undoubtedly in chaotic discussion, reorienting their entire understanding of their supposed underachiever. The thought brought not triumph, but a quiet satisfaction. Not in proving them wrong, but in having had the space to prove myself right. My phone chimed with an incoming text that had managed to get through despite the plane's ascent. It was from Naomi. "I don't know whether to be furious or impressed. Maybe both. Either way, we need to talk when you're back. This changes everything." She was right, of course. Everything had changed. Not just my perceived status within the family hierarchy, but the fundamental dynamics that had defined our relationships for decades. The careful masks of superiority, the comfortable roles of golden child and disappointing daughter, the assumed trajectories of our respective lives, all had been irrevocably disrupted. "We're receiving requests for profiles from major publications," Kieran reported, scrolling through his tablet. "Fortune, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg. They all want exclusive interviews with the secretive founder who built a billion-dollar empire in silence." I considered this, watching clouds drift past the window. The privacy I had carefully maintained for 5 years had served its purpose, allowing the technology to be judged on its merits and giving me space to build something authentic. But perhaps now was the time for a different approach. Schedule. Something with Forbes after the San Francisco events, I decided. Their technology coverage has been the most substantive, focused on innovation rather than personalities. Mira nodded approval. "Smart choice. And what about the family inquiries? Your father has now called our main office number 23 times." I smiled slightly. "Forward them all to personal voicemail for now. I'll deal with the Mason family aftermath when the business transition is stabilized." The plane banked gently westward, carrying me toward San Francisco and the formal announcement that would cement my transformation from overlooked family member to recognized industry innovator. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I had attended family gatherings where success was measured in titles, public recognition, and material displays. Now I had achieved a level of success that dwarfed those metrics, not by pursuing them directly, but by focusing on building something genuinely valuable. My phone continued to accumulate notifications. Congratulations from industry peers, interview, requests from media outlets, and increasingly urgent messages from family members. The contrast between the professional respect, evident in the former, and the stunned disbelief in the latter, was striking. "Remarkable," Mira observed, glancing at my phone. 18 hours ago, you were being offered entry-level positions at your family gathering. Now you're the executive they're all scrambling to connect with. The same person I was yesterday, I pointed out, just with different public information available. She smiled knowingly. That's what makes this so satisfying to watch. For the remainder of the flight, we finalized presentation materials and talking points for the press conference. Redwood Technologies had arranged an impressive rollout, with major clients already prepared to offer testimonials about Nexus technology and its impact on their operations. As we began our descent into San Francisco, I felt a curious sense of liberation. The careful compartmentalization I had maintained for years, between my professional identity and my family persona, was dissolving. Whatever came next would be integrated in a way I hadn't experienced before, for better or worse. The premium terminal at San Francisco International Airport was a hive of organized activity as we disembarked. A sleek town car waited to transport us directly to Redwood headquarters, where final preparations for the press conference were underway. Marcus Chen greeted me in the executive reception area, his customary intensity tempered with genuine warmth. "The woman of the hour," he said, extending his hand. "Ready to step into the spotlight after all these years?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied honestly. He nodded, understanding. The mysterious founder approach served its purpose. Now it's time for Olivia Mason to take her rightful place in the business world's consciousness. As we walked toward the conference room where the executive teams were gathering, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from James. For the first time that day, I decided to answer. "Olivia," my brother's voice held an unfamiliar note of uncertainty. "Is it true? All of it?" "Yes, James, it's all true," I confirmed, stepping into a quiet alcove while Marcus continued ahead. "Nexus Dynamics is my company. The acquisition is real. Everything being reported is accurate." There was a long pause. "Why didn't you tell us?" he finally asked, the question heavy with complicated emotions. "Would you have understood?" I countered. 5 years ago, when I was conceptualizing an algorithm that most experts considered theoretically impossible, would you have seen it as anything other than a risky detour from a conventional career path? His silence was answer enough. "I need to go," I said, spotting Mira signaling that the meeting was about to begin. "I'm in San Francisco for the formal announcement and integration meetings." "Dad is," James began. "I imagine he's processing a lot," I finished for him. "I'll speak with him when I return." "Naomi's alternating between being stunned and oddly proud," he added. "And I don't know what I am, Olivia. Surprised doesn't begin to cover it." "I understand," I said, softening slightly. "It's a lot to take in. But right now, I have a press conference to prepare for. We'll talk when I'm back." Ending the call, I rejoined the gathering executives, stepping fully into this new chapter, where my carefully constructed worlds were finally merging into one integrated reality. The family that had underestimated me for years would now need to reconcile their perceptions with the evidence of what I had built while they weren't paying attention. The next few hours were a whirlwind of executive meetings, press briefings, and strategic discussions. Throughout it all, I maintained the calm confidence that had become my professional hallmark, even as my phone continually lit up with family messages I had no time to address. By late afternoon, as we prepared for the formal press conference, one particular text cut through the noise. It was from Naomi. "I get it now. What you meant about underestimation having advantages. Watching you on CNBC right now. You're brilliant, Liv. Absolutely brilliant." A small but significant crack in the family narrative had formed. It was just the beginning. The San Francisco press conference unfolded with the precision of a carefully orchestrated symphony. Redwood Technologies' sleek auditorium filled with journalists, industry analysts, and investors eager to witness the formal announcement of what financial media was already calling the acquisition of the year. Standing backstage, I watched. the monitors as Marcus Chen opened with remarks about strategic vision and transformative partnerships. Today marks not just a business transaction, he was saying, but the beginning of a new era in supply chain management and logistics intelligence. For the past 5 years, one company has quietly revolutionized how global businesses predict disruptions, optimize inventory, and eliminate waste in complex supply systems. I smoothed the lapels of my tailored blazer, centering myself for what came next. This moment represented a seismic shift, not just for the business world digesting news of the acquisition, but for me personally. The carefully maintained boundary between my professional achievements and personal identity was about to dissolve completely. It is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage the founder and CEO of Nexus Dynamics, the visionary behind the algorithm that has transformed logistics forecasting, Olivia Mason. The applause was substantial as I walked onto the stage, camera flashes creating a constellation of light across the darkened auditorium. I took my place at the podium, surveying the room filled with curious faces trying to reconcile the mythical, anonymous founder with the confident woman now standing before them. 5 years ago, I began, my voice steady, I identified a fundamental flaw in how supply chain management systems processed unstructured data. The conventional wisdom held that predictive optimization at the scale I envisioned was theoretically impossible with existing computational frameworks. The room was utterly silent, hundreds of industry professionals leaning forward slightly, attention completely focused. But I saw possibility where others saw limitation. Instead of accepting established boundaries, I rebuilt the entire framework from first principles, creating an algorithm that could process environmental variables, geopolitical factors, and microeconomic indicators simultaneously to predict supply chain disruptions weeks before traditional systems detected warning signs. I continued with a concise overview of Nexus technology and the strategic synergies with Redwood that made the acquisition logical for both companies. The subsequent Q&A session was pointed but respectful, journalists probing for details about both the technology and my unusual choice to remain anonymous during the company's meteoric rise. Ms. Mason, one reporter asked, you maintained extreme privacy around your role as Nexus founder. Now that you're stepping into the spotlight, what would you say to other entrepreneurs, particularly women in tech, about the benefits or drawbacks of that approach? I considered the question carefully, aware that my response would likely be quoted extensively. Privacy served a specific strategic purpose for Nexus. It allowed our technology to be evaluated solely on its merits, without preconceptions about the founder's background, gender, or age, influencing how the innovation was received. That said, visibility creates different opportunities. For mentorship, for serving as an example, for challenging stereotypes directly, rather than circumventing them. I paused, then added, the best approach isn't universal. Each entrepreneur needs to determine what serves their specific vision and circumstances. Authenticity matters more than conformity to any particular model of leadership. The press conference concluded with joint photographs of the Redwood and Nexus executive teams, the formal signing of ceremonial acquisition documents, and a champagne toast that financial photographers captured eagerly. Throughout it all, I maintained professional composure while processing the surreal nature of the moment, standing in the glare of public attention after years of deliberate anonymity. As the formal events concluded, and we moved to a more intimate reception for key investors and industry partners, my phone vibrated with an incoming call. My father again. For the 29th time that day. This time, I stepped away to answer. Olivia. His voice held an unfamiliar quality, something between disbelief and something that might have been pride. I've been trying to reach you all day. I'm aware, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I've been somewhat occupied with a multi-billion-dollar business transaction. The silence that followed conveyed more than words could, the disorientation of a man whose entire understanding of his daughter had been upended in the span of hours. "I just watched your press conference online," he finally said. "You were impressive." Coming from my father, this constituted extraordinary praise. "Thank you," I said simply. "Why didn't you tell us?" The question emerged with genuine bewilderment. "All these years we thought—" "You thought exactly what you wanted to think," I interjected, more sharply than intended. I moderated my tone before continuing. "Dad, I'm in the middle of acquisition integration meetings in San Francisco. This isn't the time for family processing. I'll be back in 3 days and we can talk then." "Of course," he said, and I could hear him struggling to recalibrate our relationship dynamics in real time. "Your mother mentioned you're flying back." "Friday." "That's correct. Perhaps dinner Friday evening? At the house? Everyone would like to see you." I considered declining, but recognized the inevitable family reckoning would need to happen sooner rather than later. "Fine. 8 o'clock. As I ended the call, Marcus approached with the CFO of a major retail chain eager to discuss implementation, timelines for Nexus technology. I shifted seamlessly back into business mode. The professional confidence I'd cultivated over 5 years of building Nexus, serving as reliable armor against the complicated personal emotions stirring beneath the surface. The next 3 days passed in a blur of strategic meetings, integration planning, and interviews with select financial publications. The Forbes profile was scheduled for the following week, with a photographer assigned to capture images at Nexus headquarters, the deliberately understated offices I had designed to prioritize innovation over ostentation. Throughout it all, my phone continued to accumulate messages from extended family members. Congratulations tinged with disbelief. Questions about the company wrapped in transparent attempts to explore investment opportunities, and genuine expressions of pride from a few relatives who had always seen potential others missed. Wednesday evening, as I prepared for dinner with the Redwood executive team, a text arrived from Naomi that stood out from the deluge of family communications. "Been thinking a lot about our conversation by the lake, about expectations and freedom. I've got some questions when you're back. Real ones, not the fake supportive sister routine. Safe travels home." It was perhaps the most authentic communication we'd exchanged in years. By Friday morning, when the private jet touched down at the regional airport, I had navigated the business aspects of the acquisition with characteristic precision. The professional transition was proceeding smoothly. The personal recalibration awaiting me at the Mason family dinner that evening would undoubtedly prove more challenging. Kieran met me at the terminal, tablet in hand with updated schedules and press coverage summaries. "The office is prepared for your return," he reported as we walked to the waiting car. "The executive team has handled media inquiries effectively in your absence, and the family dinner is confirmed for 8 o'clock. I nodded acknowledgement, mentally preparing for the evening ahead. The Mason family dynamics that had remained largely unchanged for decades had been fundamentally disrupted. Tonight would establish the new parameters of those relationships. At my loft, I took time to decompress, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city that had been home to Nexus Dynamics' quiet rise. The afternoon light cast long shadows across the urban landscape, a visual reminder of how perspective shifts with time and position. In a few hours, I would face the family that had consistently underestimated me, now forced to reconcile their assumptions with irrefutable evidence of my success. At precisely 7:45 p.m., I pulled into the circular driveway of my parents' stately, colonial home. The property conveyed exactly the established prosperity the Mason family had always valued: traditional, recognizable, conventional in its signaling of success. I parked my car among the familiar luxury vehicles belonging to siblings and extended family, noting with amusement that they were arranged differently than at the reunion. My parking space was conspicuously central, no longer relegated to the periphery. The front door opened before I reached it, revealing my mother in an elegant dress that suggested this dinner had been elevated to an occasion of unusual significance. "Olivia," she greeted me, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. Everyone's waiting in the living room. I stepped into the foyer, immediately aware of subtle changes in the environment. Family photographs that had previously emphasized James's medical career and Naomi's corporate achievements had been rearranged to include more images of me. A framed copy of the Wall Street Journal's coverage of the acquisition had appeared on a side table. The home was being physically reorganized to accommodate a new family narrative. In the living room, conversation halted abruptly as I entered. My father stood near the fireplace, drink in hand, posture stiff with uncharacteristic uncertainty. James and his wife occupied the sofa, while Naomi perched on an armchair, studying me with new intensity. Uncle Robert and Aunt Margaret had apparently been included in this family recalibration dinner as well, along with Cousin Daniel, whose expression conveyed conflicted emotions, professional admiration warring with personal discomfort. "Olivia," my father broke the momentary silence, stepping forward. "Welcome home. Congratulations on the acquisition." The formality of his tone almost made me smile, as if he were greeting a respected business associate rather than his daughter. I accepted the glass of champagne my mother offered, noting it was the premium vintage usually reserved for James's career milestones. "Thank you," I replied simply, taking a seat in an armchair that positioned me with clear sightlines to everyone in the room. "It's been an eventful week." "We've been following the coverage," James said, gesturing to the financial papers scattered on the coffee table. "The market response has been extraordinary. Redwood stock is up 17% since the announcement." I nodded. "The strategic synergies are compelling to investors. Integration is proceeding efficiently." The conversation maintained this strange formality through the initial drinks and appetizers. Family members discussing my company as if it were an abstract business case, rather than addressing the elephant in the room, that they had fundamentally misjudged me for years. It was Naomi who finally broke through the artifice as we moved to the dining room. "Okay, can we please acknowledge how absolutely insane this is?" she said, placing her glass down with emphasis. "4 days ago, we were all at the reunion treating Olivia like the family charity case. Today, she's the business genius who just completed the third largest tech acquisition of the year. Can we talk about that, please?" The tension visibly eased as uncomfortable laughter acknowledged the absurdity of the situation. "Fair point," my father conceded, taking his seat at the head of the table. "Olivia, perhaps you could help us understand. How did this happen without any of us knowing?" All eyes turned to me as servers presented the first course, an elaborate culinary creation that signaled this dinner had received my mother's highest priority designation. "It didn't happen without you knowing," I corrected mildly. "It happened while you weren't paying attention. There's a difference." My father's brow furrowed. "But surely at some point, as the company grew, as you secured funding—" "I told you I was building a supply chain optimization company," I interrupted. "Many times, over many family gatherings. The information was available, but since it didn't fit the established metric of success, prestigious institution, recognized title, conventional career progression, it wasn't deemed worthy of serious attention." Uncomfortable glances were exchanged around the table as family members recognized the truth in my assessment. "But $3.2 billion, Uncle Robert interjected, still struggling to reconcile the numbers with the niece he had patronized for years. "That's not just success, Olivia. That's extraordinary achievement by any standard." "Yes," I agreed simply. "It is." "Why maintain such secrecy?" my mother asked, genuine confusion in her voice. "Even if we underestimated the potential initially, why not share the growth as it happened? The funding rounds, the client acquisitions, those were newsworthy moments." I considered my response carefully, aware that my answer would establish the tone for our relationship moving forward. Privacy served multiple purposes, I explained. Professionally, it allowed the technology to be evaluated on its merits without preconceptions about the founder influencing perceptions. Personally, I paused, meeting my mother's gaze directly. It provided the space to build something, authentic without the weight of family expectations or comparisons. My father shifted uncomfortably. We only ever wanted success for you, Olivia. No, I corrected gently. You wanted a specific kind of success, one that looked like James's, medical career or Naomi's corporate advancement. When I chose a different path, that didn't register as potential success. It registered as potential failure. James cleared his throat. That's not entirely fair. We were concerned because startups have a high rate of failure. The statistics didn't apply to what I was building, I interjected. I wasn't pursuing a conventional startup trajectory. I identified a fundamental flaw in existing systems and developed a solution that industry experts initially deemed impossible. That required space to focus on execution rather than explaining complex technical concepts to people who had already decided the approach couldn't work. Daniel, who had remained uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. I feel like an idiot, he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. I literally sat next to you at the reunion explaining why Nexus Dynamics was an attractive investment opportunity, without having any idea I was talking to the founder. This broke the tension somewhat, earning genuine laughter around the table. If it helps, your analysis of the technology was surprisingly accurate, I offered. Just missing some key internal information, like the fact that the brilliant Enigma founder was my cousin who I've been condescending to at family gatherings for years, he suggested wryly, among other things. As the main course was served, the conversation shifted toward more specific questions about Nexus technology and the integration with Redwood. I explained the core innovation in terms accessible to non-technical family members, watching comprehension dawn in eyes that had previously glazed over when I mentioned my work. So all those times you said you were working on supply chain optimization algorithms. You were actually creating something revolutionary, my mother observed, the pride in her voice now unmistakable. Yes, I confirmed. Exactly what I said I was doing. But you never mentioned the scale, my father countered. The funding rounds, the valuation, those would have changed how we understood your work. Would they? I asked, genuinely curious. Or would they have simply changed how you valued it? Because those are different things. He had no immediate response to that, recognition slowly dawning in his expression. Naomi, who had been watching this exchange intently, leaned forward. I have a different question, she said. What was it like? Building something that significant with no one watching, or rather, with people watching but not really seeing. It was the first question all evening that sought to understand my experience, rather than explain or justify the family's perception. I considered it thoughtfully. Clarifying, I finally said. When external validation isn't available, you develop absolute clarity about your own metrics for success. Every decision, every hire, every feature prioritization had to align with the core vision rather than external expectations. That creates something remarkably focused and authentic. She nodded slowly, processing this. And now? With everyone watching? Now the challenge is maintaining that clarity amid the noise, I acknowledged, preserving the essence of what made Nexus exceptional while navigating new expectations. As the dinner progressed to dessert, family members gradually shifted, from shock and adjustment to more forward-looking inquiries, subtle explorations of how my new status would affect family dynamics moving forward. Will you continue working after the integration period? My mother asked, the question revealing lingering gaps in her understanding of both my role and the scale of what I had built. I'll be joining Redwood's executive leadership as Chief Innovation Officer, I explained patiently. My team remains intact, with expanded resources to advance our technological roadmap. And I retain board positions with several industry organizations focused on supply chain sustainability. I meant, with your financial position now, she clarified awkwardly. I smiled slightly. Success creates options, Mom. It doesn't eliminate purpose. As coffee was served, my father cleared his throat with deliberate formality. I owe you an apology, Olivia, he said, the words clearly difficult for him. We underestimated you. I underestimated you. For years, I missed what you were building because it didn't fit my preconceived notions of success. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, even as he struggled to fully articulate the paradigm shift in his understanding of his daughter. I appreciate that, I said simply. We're incredibly proud of what you've accomplished, my mother added, reaching to squeeze my hand across the table. Not just the business success, but the vision and determination it required. I accepted these belated acknowledgments with grace, recognizing them as genuine if overdue. The true test would be how family dynamics evolved moving forward, whether they could relate to me as I actually was rather than as they had assumed me to be. As the evening drew to a close, family members departed with promises of continued celebration, investment inquiries poorly disguised as casual questions, and invitations to events where my presence now represented a different kind of family asset. Naomi lingered as others left, waiting until we were alone in the front hallway before speaking. This changes everything, doesn't it? She said quietly. It doesn't have to, I replied. I'm still the same person I was last week. She laughed softly. But we aren't the same family, are we? The whole dynamic was built on certain assumptions about each of us, assumptions that just imploded spectacularly. I couldn't argue with her assessment. Perhaps that's not entirely negative. No, she agreed thoughtfully. It just means navigating unfamiliar terrain. She hesitated before adding, For what it's worth, what you've built is genuinely impressive. Not because of the acquisition price or the market validation, but because it solves real problems that matter. That's true whether the family understood it or not. It was perhaps the most sincere conversation we'd had in years. One adult to another rather than golden child to presumed underachiever. Thank you, I said simply. As I drove back to my loft that night, I reflected on the evening's recalibration. The family's perception had shifted dramatically, but the fundamental reality hadn't changed at all. I was exactly who I had always been: focused, innovative, determined to build something meaningful on my own terms. The only difference was that now they could see it too. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus Chen. Integration team reports all systems transferring smoothly. Board presentation Tuesday has been finalized. The future looks bright, partner? I smiled at the validation that mattered most, not the belated family recognition, but the concrete impact of the technology I had built and the problems it solved for businesses across the globe. That had always been the true measure of success, whether others recognized it or not. The city lights glimmered below as I entered my loft, the quiet space that had witnessed countless late nights of coding and strategic planning. External perceptions had shifted dramatically, but my internal compass remained steady. The journey had never been about proving others wrong. It had been about building something right, and that work, despite the acquisition milestone, was really just beginning. 3 months after the acquisition announcement, I stood at the window of my expanded office overlooking the city. The Nexus division of Redwood Technologies now occupied 3 floors of the downtown building I had purchased. Years earlier, the original team growing strategically as we implemented our technology across Redwood's global infrastructure. Morning sunlight glinted off the river winding through the city center, a reminder of how circumstances flow and shift while fundamental principles remain constant. My executive assistant knocked lightly before entering with a tablet. Your schedule. For today, she said, placing it on my desk. The Innovation Summit keynote is finalized. The university has confirmed the endowment announcement for next week. And your mother called again about the family foundation meeting. I nodded acknowledgement. Thank you, Rachel. Since the acquisition, invitations had flooded in, speaking engagements at prestigious tech conferences, board positions at major corporations, investment opportunities, and countless requests for mentorship and advice. I had been selective, accepting only those that aligned with my core values and vision for what came next. The university endowment was particularly meaningful, a $20 million fund for women in computational sciences, with emphasis on unconventional approaches to seemingly intractable problems. It was the kind of support I would have benefited from during those early years developing the Nexus algorithm when conventional wisdom insisted my approach couldn't work. The family foundation was more complicated. In the aftermath of the acquisition revelation, my father had proposed creating a Mason family foundation with me as the primary benefactor, a notion that struck me as both ironic and potentially problematic, given the family's history of defining success in narrow, conventional terms. I had agreed to discuss it, but with specific conditions about the foundation's focus and governance. My phone chimed with a message from Naomi. Lunch still on for today? Have news. I smiled slightly, confirming the plan. My relationship with my sister had undergone the most interesting evolution since the acquisition. After the initial shock had worn off, she had approached our new dynamic with refreshing authenticity, asking thoughtful questions about my journey, and gradually revealing her own misgivings about the corporate path she had followed to earn family approval. The morning proceeded efficiently with executive meetings focused on integration progress and new development initiatives. The Nexus algorithm was now being implemented across Redwood's global client base, generating measurable improvements in supply chain resilience and sustainability metrics. The market had responded enthusiastically, with Redwood stock up 32% since the acquisition and industry analysts predicting continued growth as implementation expanded. At noon, I walked 3 blocks to Eliza's, a small bistro that had become a regular meeting spot for Naomi and me over the past months. She was already there, dressed in her usual corporate attire but with subtle differences I had begun to notice. More personalized accessories, less rigid styling. Small expressions of individuality emerging as she questioned the prescribed path she had followed so diligently. "Sorry I'm late," I said, taking the seat across from her. Integration review ran long. "No problem," she replied, studying me, with unusual intensity. "How's the merger going?" "It's not a merger," I corrected automatically. "It's an acquisition with retained operational independence, but it's proceeding well. The technology is scaling effectively across their client infrastructure." She nodded, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Still correcting people's terminology. Some things never change." I returned her smile, acknowledging the observation. "Precision matters in business communication. You mentioned news?" Naomi took a deep breath, straightening almost imperceptibly. "I gave notice at McKinley yesterday. My last day is in 2 weeks. This was unexpected. "You're leaving the partnership? Why?" "Because I've been asking myself some uncomfortable questions since your acquisition announcement," she said, maintaining steady eye contact. "About why I chose the path I did, whether it actually aligns with what I value, and what success really looks like for me personally, not for the family narrative." The waiter arrived to take our orders, providing a moment for me to process this revelation. When we were alone again, I leaned forward slightly. "That's significant. Do you have another position lined up?" "Not exactly," she admitted. "I have a concept I've been developing for a specialized consulting practice focused on organizational sustainability. Not just environmental metrics, but holistic operational resilience. I've been researching it for months, but kept hesitating to make the leap." "What changed?" She laughed softly. "You did. Or rather, watching what happened with you changed my perspective. For years, I pursued the exact path designed to earn family approval. Prestigious firm, youngest partner, all the external validation our parents value. I achieved every marker of success in their playbook. And that's not enough? I suggested. It's not authentic, she corrected. Watching you these past months, not just the business success, but the clarity you have about your work and its value. It made me realize how much of my career has been about external validation rather than intrinsic purpose. I considered her words carefully, recognizing their significance. The family will have opinions about this decision. Oh, they already do, she confirmed with a wry smile. Dad spent 45 minutes explaining why I should reconsider, complete, with statistics on startup failure rates and the value of institutional prestige. Mom suggested I'm having some sort of delayed quarter-life crisis inspired by your unconventional choices. And how does that feel? I asked, genuinely curious. Terrifying, she admitted, and surprisingly liberating. For the first time, I'm making a professional decision based entirely on what I believe is right for me, not what will earn the most approval from family or peers. The waiter delivered our meals, and we shifted briefly to lighter topics. A recent film she'd enjoyed, my experience speaking at a tech conference in Berlin the previous week. As we finished eating, Naomi returned to the subject of her career transition. I have a proposal, she said, her tone shifting to something more formal. I've been studying Nexus's approach to supply chain resilience and sustainability metrics. The organizational consulting practice I'm developing would be complementary rather than competitive, focusing on human systems and corporate culture rather than technical infrastructure. I raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting a business collaboration? A pilot program, she clarified. Redwood has dozens of clients implementing your technology. That technical implementation creates organizational ripple effects as workflow systems change. My practice would help companies navigate those human elements of transformation, creating more successful integration. It was an intelligent proposal, addressing a genuine need I had observed during client implementations. Technical solutions, no matter how brilliant, achieved optimal results only when the human systems around them adapted effectively. Send me a formal proposal, I said after a moment's consideration. If it's as thoughtful as your initial concept suggests, we might have something interesting to discuss. Her expression brightened visibly. Really? You're not just saying that because we're sisters? I would never compromise business decisions based on family relationships, I replied honestly. That works in both directions. I wouldn't reject a good idea because it came from family, nor would I accept a flawed one for the same reason. She nodded, understanding. That's why I respect your opinion. It's based on merit, not obligation. As we finished lunch and prepared to part ways, Naomi hesitated. There's something else I've been wanting to ask you. Something more personal. Go ahead. Was it lonely? She asked quietly. Building Nexus without being able to share the journey with anyone who really understood what you were creating? The question caught me by surprise. Not because it was inappropriate, but because it was the first time anyone in the family had inquired about the emotional experience rather than the practical or financial aspects of my journey. Yes, I answered honestly. There were moments of profound isolation, especially in the beginning when the concept existed primarily in my mind and the skepticism was nearly universal. But there was also a unique clarity in that solitude, a space where the vision could develop without distortion from external opinions or expectations. She absorbed this thoughtfully. I've been so conditioned to seek validation at every step that the idea of building something significant in silence is both terrifying and strangely appealing. It's not for everyone, I acknowledged, but neither is the conventional path. The key is alignment with your authentic values and vision, not conformity to either an established model or a contrarian one. We parted with a brief hug, a gesture that would have been unthinkable at the family reunion months earlier. And I returned to the office with Naomi's questions lingering in my thoughts. The personal cost of the path I had chosen was real, but so was the integrity of what I had built precisely because it had developed free from external pressure to conform to conventional expectations. The afternoon brought a virtual board meeting with Redwood Technologies executive leadership, where we reviewed integration milestones and discussed strategic expansion into emerging markets. My role as Chief Innovation Officer provided the influence to ensure Nexus technology was implemented with fidelity to its core principles, rather than being diluted for short-term convenience, a protection I had negotiated carefully during acquisition talks. The client adoption rate exceeds projections by 28%, Marcus reported, his satisfaction evident even through the video interface. Your technical team's approach to implementation is proving remarkably effective. We prioritize understanding each client's specific supply chain vulnerabilities before customizing the solution, I explained. It requires more initial investment, but delivers superior long-term results. As the meeting concluded, Marcus requested a private moment. When the other participants had signed off, he leaned toward the camera. Forbes is running the cover feature next week, he said. Their editor called it the most substantive profile they've published on a tech acquisition in years. No fluff, focused on the technology and vision. Good, I replied. That was the agreement. They're calling it the Quiet Revolutionary, he added with a smile. Seems fitting. The photographer sent preview images. They captured something authentic without turning it into a personality cult. This had been my one condition for the profile, that it focus on the technology's impact rather than crafting a personalized success narrative disconnected from the substance of what we had built. The business media's tendency to mythologize founders often came at the expense of understanding the actual innovation, a distortion I had deliberately avoided through years of strategic anonymity. After the call ended, I reviewed the final preparations for tomorrow's Innovation Summit, where I would deliver the keynote address. The event would bring together leaders from global supply chain companies, sustainability initiatives, and technology innovators, a strategic opportunity to position Nexus technology within the broader context of creating resilient, ethical business infrastructure. My phone chimed with a message from my father. Congratulations on the Princeton Engineering School recognition. Perhaps you could mention the family's long-standing support of educational excellence in your acceptance speech. I smiled slightly at the transparent attempt to retroactively associate the Mason family with my success. The Princeton School of Engineering had announced their annual Innovation Award would go to the Nexus algorithm, recognition from the institution, where I had first begun developing the theoretical framework, while professors insisted the approach was mathematically unsound. The speech will focus on encouraging unconventional approaches to seemingly unsolvable problems, I replied neutrally. If you'd like to attend as my guest, please let me know by Friday. This pattern had emerged across the family in the months since the acquisition announcement. Attempts to realign the narrative from Olivia succeeded despite our lack of support to Olivia succeeded with our encouragement, just in non-traditional ways. I neither directly confronted nor explicitly validated these revisions, choosing instead to focus on the present and future rather than relitigating the past. As evening approached, I finished reviewing the Innovation Summit materials and prepared to depart. Rachel appeared at my door with a package. This just arrived for you. Courier said it was important. The elegantly wrapped box contained no external identification, but as I opened it, I immediately recognized my grandmother's handwriting on a sealed envelope resting atop carefully preserved papers. My breath caught. She had passed away 3 years before Nexus was founded. The letter was dated a week before her death. Olivia. If you're reading this, then Martha has followed my instructions to deliver these papers to you upon specific conditions I established before my passing. I've left instructions that this package, should find its way to you only when you've achieved something significant on your own terms, not according to the Mason family definition of success. Enclosed, you'll find the original patents for the hydraulic filtration system your grandfather was told couldn't possibly work, the invention that ultimately built the Mason family fortune that everyone now takes for granted. What family lore doesn't include is that Robert Mason was dismissed by every engineering firm in the country before proving his design viable. Sound familiar, my brilliant granddaughter? I saw in you what I saw in him, the rare courage to pursue a vision others can't yet comprehend. The family has grown too comfortable with conventional paths to success, forgetting that genuine innovation requires walking alone for a time. Whatever you've built that triggered the delivery of this package, know that I would have understood its value even before others recognized it. Some of us are meant to create the future, not just inhabit it safely. With pride and love, Grandmother Elizabeth Thigh, I sat motionless, processing the unexpected connection across time. My grandmother had somehow recognized a quality in me that the rest of the family had missed, and had created this time capsule of encouragement that would reach me only when I had proven that faith justified. Beneath the letter lay the original patent applications and technical drawings for my grandfather's invention, his meticulous notes documenting both technical specifications and rejection letters from companies that couldn't envision the system's potential. The family narrative had always portrayed him as an instantly recognized genius, rather than acknowledging the lonely period of doubt and dismissal that preceded his eventual success. This revelation provided a new context for my own journey, not as an aberration from the family legacy, but as a return to its authentic roots, before success had calcified into rigid expectations and prescribed paths. I carefully returned the documents to their box, this unexpected inheritance more meaningful than any financial legacy could have been. For the first time, I felt a genuine connection to the Mason family history, not to the polished mythology they presented at reunions, but to the messier, more authentic story of innovation against prevailing wisdom. The next morning dawned clear and bright as I prepared for the Innovation Summit. The venue was the city's premier convention center, now filled with industry leaders and technology innovators, eager to hear from the previously anonymous founder of Nexus Dynamics. As I reviewed my notes backstage, I thought about my grandmother's letter and the unexpected continuity it represented. The summit director appeared, indicating it was time. I took a deep breath and walked onto the stage, greeted by applause from hundreds of industry professionals who 3 months earlier would not have recognized me despite using my technology. Innovation doesn't announce itself with fanfare, I began, scanning the attentive faces. It often emerges quietly, in the spaces between established certainties, in the persistent questions that conventional wisdom has abandoned as unsolvable. For the next 30 minutes, I shared the core principles that had guided Nexus's development, not just the technical architecture, but the philosophical approach to questioning fundamental assumptions about how unstructured data could be processed, to illuminate previously invisible patterns in global supply systems. The most valuable innovations often appear initially as impossibilities, I continued. They require not just technical skill, but the courage to move forward when respected voices insist you're pursuing a mathematical dead end or a theoretical impossibility. From my vantage point on stage, I could see my family seated in the reserved section near the front, my parents, James and Naomi. They had never attended a professional presentation of mine before the acquisition, but now sat, with expressions of attentive pride as if they had always been my most dedicated supporters. Success is ultimately measured not by recognition or acquisition values, I said, approaching my conclusion, but by the tangible problems solved, by the real-world impact of the solutions we create. Nexus technology now prevents billions in supply chain disruptions annually, reduces environmental waste through predictive optimization, and enables businesses to build genuinely resilient infrastructures. That impact exists whether anyone knows my name or not. The standing ovation that followed was gratifying, but less meaningful than the quiet nod from Naomi, who alone in the family seemed to truly understand what I was expressing about authentic value versus external validation. The remainder of the day brought a series of panel discussions and networking events where industry leaders sought insights into both Nexus technology and the journey of building it. I navigated these conversations with the same balanced approach I had maintained since stepping into public visibility, focusing on substantive innovation rather than personalized success narratives, redirecting attention to the technology's impact rather than founder mythology. As the summit concluded, I found myself in conversation with a young engineer whose questions revealed both technical brilliance and the self-doubt that often accompanies unconventional thinking. She described a theoretical approach to quantum computing that established experts had dismissed as fundamentally unworkable. "Everyone says it's impossible," she explained, frustration evident beneath professional composure. "But I can see the solution pathway so clearly, even if I can't yet fully articulate why it works." I recognized in her the same determined vision I had followed in developing Nexus, the ability to perceive possibility where others saw only limitations. "Sometimes the most valuable breakthroughs come from questions everyone else has stopped asking," I said. "The key is distinguishing between truly impossible challenges and merely difficult ones that require new frameworks." Her expression shifted. Subtly, recognition dawning. "How did you maintain conviction when even respected experts insisted your approach couldn't work?" "By focusing on results rather than validation," I replied. Each incremental success provided evidence that the overall vision was sound, even when I couldn't yet prove it comprehensively. Small validations sustained me through the larger doubts. We exchanged contact information, and I offered to review her research framework, not to judge its viability, which time and testing would determine, but to share perspective on navigating the path of unconventional innovation. This type of mentorship, connecting with brilliant minds pursuing questions others had abandoned, had become one of the most meaningful aspects of my post-acquisition visibility. That evening, the family gathered for dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown, another new tradition that had emerged since the acquisition changed family dynamics. Conversation flowed with less hierarchy than previous gatherings, though subtle. Adjustments in how relatives engaged with me remained evident. Where once they had offered unsolicited career advice, they now sought my opinions on investments and business strategy. "The summit presentation was impressive," my father observed, as appetizers arrived. "Clearly positioned Nexus as the industry standard for predictive supply chain technology." "That was the objective," I acknowledged. "The integration with Redwood amplifies implementation capacity while maintaining the core innovation principles." James, who had been uncharacteristically contemplative lately, leaned forward. "Something you said today resonated with me," he said. "About measuring success by problems solved rather than recognition received. It's made me reconsider some of the research directions I've been avoiding because they're considered too experimental for immediate prestige." This was unexpected. James had always been the family member most focused on traditional markers of achievement. "What sort of research?" I asked, genuinely curious. He described a regenerative cardiac technique that challenged established surgical protocols, potentially more effective but with a higher learning curve and less immediate recognition from peers. "I've had the concept for years, but kept prioritizing more conventionally accepted approaches that would generate immediate publications and speaking invitations." "Perhaps both have value in different contexts," I suggested. "The question is whether you're making that choice consciously based on what matters to you or defaulting to external metrics out of habit." He nodded slowly, processing this perspective. "I've been asking myself that question repeatedly since watching your acquisition announcement. Whether I've been building a career I genuinely value or one designed primarily for external validation." My mother, listening intently to this exchange, interjected with characteristic focus on appearances. Your father and I have always encouraged excellence in whatever path you children chose, she said. The revision of family history now so habitual, she likely believed it. We simply wanted you to reach your full potential. Rather than challenging this convenient reframing, I simply said, the more interesting question is how we each define potential and who gets to determine when it's been reached. The conversation shifted to Naomi's new consulting venture, which she presented with growing confidence. The family's reception remained cautiously supportive, their established metrics for success visibly conflicting with their new awareness that unrecognized paths could lead to extraordinary outcomes. As dinner concluded, my father raised his glass in a toast. To the continued success of all the Mason children, he said, each finding their own path to excellence. I accepted the toast with gracious acknowledgement, recognizing both its sincerity and its strategic repositioning of family narrative. The evening concluded with warmer interactions than would have been possible months earlier, though still navigating the complex recalibration of relationships. Driving home beneath a canopy of stars, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment, from the deliberate isolation of building something revolutionary in silence, to the integration of that achievement into a new chapter where visibility created different opportunities for impact. My phone chimed with a message from the young engineer I had met at the summit, sharing a revised framework for her quantum computing approach based on our conversation. Her brilliant mind was questioning assumptions others took for granted, seeing pathways others insisted couldn't exist. I smiled, recognizing that perhaps this was the most meaningful outcome of stepping into visibility after years of strategic anonymity. The opportunity to validate other unconventional thinkers, to confirm that innovation sometimes requires walking alone for a time until results speak louder than skepticism. At my loft, I stood at the window overlooking the city lights, grandmother's letter and grandfather's patents carefully preserved on my desk. The true Mason legacy, it seemed, was not the polished success narrative celebrated at family reunions, but the courage to pursue vision when conventional wisdom insisted it was impossible. Success wasn't proving others wrong. It was proving yourself right through tangible impact and measurable results. The family's belated recognition was a footnote, not the headline, in that story of authentic achievement. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, integration milestones, technology advancements, strategic decisions about Nexus's evolution within the redwood ecosystem. But the core principles remained constant: focus on real problems, question fundamental assumptions, and measure success by impact rather than acclaim. The city lights below mirrored the stars above, both illuminating paths forward for those with vision to see beyond conventional limitations. Some journeys required walking alone for a time, seeing possibilities others dismissed as impossible. But the results, when they finally emerged, spoke with an eloquence that transcended both skepticism and celebration. In the end, success wasn't what others recognized. It was what you created that could stand on its own merit, whether anyone was watching or not. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.